This video is going to be a review of the writing process for the fourth FRQ on the AP test, which is the argumentative FRQ. So the argumentative FRQ is going to be a little uneasy for you because there's no right or wrong answer. It's all based on how you support your answer using information, especially from the foundational documents that we are reviewing during the course of the year. It's really, that's how you're graded, is like how you support your claim. You're always going to be required to supply two pieces of evidence to support your side of an answer. The first piece of evidence should always be from one of the provided foundational documents the question asks you to provide. And then the second piece of evidence can either be from another one of the listed documents, a document that is not listed, or something else that's not document related, but is a pretty specific point from AP Gov. So it's an opinionated question that you're going to have to answer using basically two pieces of evidence to support your side of the answer. Again, one has to be from a document. The other one can be from an additional document or not from a document. The Constitution is the only document that you could use for both pieces of evidence, as long as you use evidence from two different articles, meaning about two different branches, you use evidence that relate to two different amendments, or that you use evidence from an article and an amendment, right? So you can use the Constitution for both pieces of evidence as long as you follow those rules. On the AP test, you'll have 100 minutes total to complete the four FRQs. They recommend 25 minutes each. I would definitely recommend that you spend more of that 100 minutes on this particular FRQ. So this is what the FRQ is going to look like. Every one is going to look kind of the same, but the question is going to change and the documents they give you to use are going to change. So this one basically says, develop an argument that explains whether or not the Electoral College should be abolished and replaced with direct popular election. Okay, so it's basically saying, should we get rid of the Electoral College and replace it with direct popular election? This is something we talked about in class. So there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's all based on how you support your evidence. So the first thing it's going to say is articulate a defensible claim. We call that a thesis that responds to the prompt and establishes a line of reasoning. We'll talk about that in a second. Support your claim with at least two pieces of accurate and relevant information, and it tells you that at least one piece of evidence you use to support your side of the argument has to come from either the Constitution, Brutus 1, Fed 51, or Fed 70. And then you could use a second piece of evidence from the other foundational documents or from your study of just AP Gov and presidential election stuff and things we talked about. You're going to use reasoning to explain why your evidence supports your claim. And then you're going to respond to an opposing viewpoint and you're going to provide a rebuttal of the opposite side of the argument. Okay, so there's a couple different things. We're going to break this down piece by piece. So you definitely need to brainstorm a little bit before you start writing. What's your opinion about the question? Some people will write it based on what their true opinion is. Others will just write it based on what the easiest route to take is, right? It's easier to write about one side or the other. Nobody's hooking you up to a lie detector to determine whether this is actually how you would answer the question in real life. How might the provided documents support your opinion? And then the other thing you need to think about is what's the other side of the argument, right? You need to identify what people that disagree with you would sort of think about. All right. This is going to be 4 paragraphs and not even necessarily 4 paragraphs, because paragraph 1 is just going to be a singular sentence. It's going to be your thesis sentence. Paragraph 2 is going to be your first piece of supporting evidence to support your opinion. Paragraph 3 is going to be your second piece of supporting evidence. And paragraph 4 is going to be where you look at what the other side believes and why they're wrong. So it's going to be 4 paragraphs, kind of like 3.5, because the first paragraph's not really a paragraph, it's a sentence. All right, so let's do paragraph number 1, which is simply the thesis sentence. So on the left-hand side are some sentence starters, and on the right-hand side is an example of how this would translate if this was the actual AP test, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to actually start your thesis sentence with the viewpoint of the people that are on the other side of the argument than you. Make sure you write something like although, right? And then what their opinion is, right? And then you're going to transition to write in actuality, and then your stance, right? What's your opinion? And then a because, and then your 2 pieces of evidence, right? So before you write your thesis statement, you have to know what your opinion is, what the other side might think, and then your 2 supporting reasons. So look at how this translates on the right-hand side if I was actually writing the thesis sentence. Although some people may believe the Electoral College should remain intact because of tradition, so this is what the other people believe. You're starting with their viewpoint, right? That some people think the Electoral College should stay because it's the way we've always done things. Now here's your transition. In actuality, the Electoral College should be abolished and replaced with direct popular election. There is your opinion. And then here is what they call your line of reasoning. This is your because it more accurately reflects the will of the people and encourages a larger voter turnout. So in this thesis statement, we have their opinion, we have your opinion, and we have why you believe in that opinion, right? So in actuality, the Electoral College should be abolished and replaced with direct popular election is your opinion. And then what follows the because are your two reasons, because it more accurately reflects the will of the people and it encourages a larger voter turnout. So those are your two reasons that you had already brainstormed. So now once you have your thesis statement, by the way, if you don't have an approved thesis statement, you can't get credit for the rest of the essay. So it's really important that you follow this format, right? With their opinion, your opinion, and then the reasons that support your opinion. Paragraph number 2 is going then to elaborate on that first piece of evidence that you mentioned in your thesis. And this is the one that is related to like a document. First piece of evidence you highlight in your thesis statement, and then in the first evidence paragraph is the one related to the document. So again, you had your choice of documents, right, listed in the question. So there's a couple things you have to do within the evidence paragraphs. You have to name the evidence, right? I literally want you to write something that says like the first piece of evidence that supports, restate your position, and then be sure to mention like the documents that you're sort of like using. The second thing that you're going to do is describe a little bit about like that you know what that evidence is from that document. And the third thing you're going to do is specifically explain how that evidence supports your thesis statement. So watch how I basically do that. Now I numbered it 1, 2, and 3 on the right-hand side, so you can see how it matches up to the 3 tasks you need to do in the evidence paragraph to get full credit. So I'm naming the evidence first. The first piece of evidence that supports the need to abolish the Electoral College and replace it with direct popular election is the 17th Amendment in the Constitution. So I've basically identified, again, what my opinion is, and secondly, what document I'm using. So now I need to describe a little bit about what I know about how that document relates to this question. The 17th Amendment, which is obviously in the Constitution, established the direct election of U.S. senators. Prior to this, the senators were actually selected by the states, and the people had no say. So I've demonstrated I know a little bit about the 17th Amendment. The last task I need is to connect this evidence with my thesis, which is that we need to abolish the Electoral College. This supports the need to replace the Electoral College with direct election because it shows that changes have already been made to increase the will of the people in other electoral areas. Surely, if the people were needed to have a greater say in Senate elections, they should also have a greater influence in presidential elections. So I started by naming the evidence I'm using, then I described a little bit about the evidence, and then I specifically connected the evidence to my overall opinion. You need to do those 3 things to get credit for this paragraph. The third paragraph is your second piece of supporting evidence. You're doing the same thing. You're naming the evidence, you're describing a little bit about what you know about the evidence, and then specifically how it supports your thesis statement. So again, this one does not have to be from a document. It can be from one of the other documents. It can be from another document that's not listed. It could be from a court case, or if you use the Constitution for the first one, you could also use the Constitution for the second one, as long as it's a different part of the Constitution or a different amendment, or it doesn't have to be Constitution or document related at all. It could just be a point from AP Gov. So I'm gonna basically name the evidence. The second piece of evidence that supports, there's my thesis again, the need to abolish the Electoral College and replace it with direct popular election is the idea that it will increase voter turnout. So this is not something that's related to a document. It's just something I remember from AP Gov. If we don't have the Electoral College, more people are going to want to vote. So why? The Electoral College depresses voter turnout because the candidates with the most popular votes within each state basically receive all the electoral votes for the state. In some states, there's a clear majority for one political party, such as Democrats in California. Many Republicans may choose not to participate in the election because there is little chance of their party's candidate receiving the most votes. So I just explained a little bit about how the Electoral College depresses voter turnout. Then let me connect that to my thesis. This supports the need to replace the Electoral College with direct election because citizens would be more willing to vote if their vote was contributing to an overall national tally. Getting more citizens to vote is a key part of a healthy democracy. Again, I named the evidence, I described a little bit about the evidence, and I specifically connected it to my thesis. Mission accomplished, all three things done in the evidence paragraphs. Okay. Fourth paragraph is whatever you started your thesis statement with, which was the opposition's viewpoint, you're going to restate that. And then you're going to explain that a little bit, and then you're going to explain why they're wrong. So remember in the thesis statement, we basically talked about how some people might want to keep the Electoral College because it's just the traditional way of doing things. So maybe you start your rebuttal by just acknowledging that again. Some people believe that the Electoral College should be kept because it's part of our nation's tradition. Okay? You've identified what the other people believe. Now you're going to explain why they're wrong. However, this is called a rebuttal. However, this is a flawed view because it implies that we should never change the way our government works. If we kept things all intact that were from our country's original founding, necessary changes to abolish slavery, providing opportunities to vote to groups like women and African Americans would have never occurred. So I've basically acknowledged, again, what their viewpoint is, but now I've explained why it's flawed. So that's what the argumentative FRQ is. It's coming up with your stance on an issue, right? Coming up with two supporting details, one that comes from a document that's listed to basically support your opinion, writing an evidence paragraph that relates to each of those, and then elaborating a little bit on the opposition's viewpoint, and then ultimately explaining why it's wrong. And that's the argumentative FRQ.